Cultural and religious bias. How to avoid bias in scientific investigations. What is bias? In science, researchers need to identify bias that they may have or others may have in order to obtain the clearest results and data possible. Some types of bias can be obvious to the researchers, but there are two that need to be looked at more closely: cultural bias and religious bias. What is cultural bias? Cultural bias can be defined as the interpretation of situations, actions, or data based on the standards of one's own culture. These interpretations are based on the ideas that you have because of the culture in which you grew up. Language. Across different cultures, words mean different things. So if I'm using one term and you from a different culture than I are using the same word, they could have different meanings. So we need to make sure we have the same understanding of what we're talking about. Ethical concepts are right or wrong. What I was taught is right or wrong reflects my culture, where I grew up, what my parents have taught me. But that may not be the same as someone who grew up in a different environment, different parents, different background, different parts of the world, etc. Understanding of facts or evidence-based proof. Once again, how I interpret the facts determined in the research may be different because my frame of reference, what I know, is different. Here are some examples. There could be either intentional or unintentional ethnic or racial bias. We need to recognize that in today's society, in today's communities, we live in a very cultural, diverse environment. Many people from many different parts of the world raised very differently. So when conducting research in such a diverse population, it's going to become more difficult for we as researchers to reach an objective point of view or an objective decision. In your culture, the environment has a special meaning to you. How you perceive this environment will depend on how you were raised. For example, Indigenous people have a unique perspective on the environment and the belief that we must be at one with the environment. They have ancestral ties to the land and the natural resources on which their identities, their cultural livelihoods, as well as their physical and spiritual well-being are linked together. When performing research then, and analyzing these results we've obtained, we need to be aware of these types of cultural bias. What is religious bias? Religious bias is a bias that exists towards individuals on the basis of their religion or beliefs. Unfortunately, we have religious discrimination. Religious discrimination occurs when a person or group is treated differently because of the particular beliefs which they hold about a religion. It doesn't mean they're wrong. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means they are unique, or you are unique. Religious beliefs and scientific beliefs, however, do not always match. To illustrate this, think about your belief in how the world was created. Different religions have a different belief of what we call creationism. Some believe that it was created in 7 days by God. Scientists have discovered, however, what they think is irrefutable proof that that's not how it happened. That in fact it was created over many millions of years. So who is right? Or is it just how we're interpreting what we've been led to believe? There was a study conducted by State of the Planet, How Religion Influences Our Relationship with the Environment. And I provided here the web address that you could use if you wanted to learn more. Religious bias in the environment. How might religious bias affect our study of the environment? As I've pointed out, studies have shown that religion influences our parts of our lifestyle that affect the environment. This in turn can lead to discussions along religious lines on the use of natural resources and emission of greenhouse gases, leading to environmental degradation. Research has shown, and by that I mean the study we've talked about, that nations whose inhabitants are less religious, which they've given a criteria for, tend to use more resources and produce more emissions and are more prepared to take action on environmental issues. However, nations where populations are more religious tend to use fewer resources and have less capacity to meet environmental changes. Why is this so? Research is ongoing in the discussion of how religious bias affects the study of the environment. It is something that we must consider when designing, developing, and implementing our research projects. Diversity.